My name is Eli Carver. I am 38 years old, and on a Sunday morning in April, standing in the kitchen of the home we'd built together, my wife looked me in the eye and told me that if I couldn't handle her spending our weekends with her ex-husband, maybe we weren't right for each other. I set my coffee down. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said, "You're right." She blinked. That was not the answer she'd rehearsed for. 3 weeks later, she texted asking what my weekend looked like. I sent her a selfie from Changi Airport in Singapore. I wanted to give her a clear answer. Before I tell you what happened next, please hit like and subscribe. Drop your city and local time below. I love knowing where you're listening from. Now let me take you back to 6 years ago, when Petra Vane walked into a room and rearranged a centerpiece by 3 inches, and somehow everything looked better. I thought, this woman has her life together. I didn't yet know what that phrase would cost me. I met Petra on a March evening at a fundraiser for the University of Washington Medical Center. I remember the smell of the place, fresh lilies on every table, warm lighting, the low hum of a room full of people performing generosity. My client had dragged me there. I was ready to leave by 9. Then I saw her. She was standing near the far table, tilting a centerpiece 2 inches to the left. Just 2 inches. And the whole room settled. She stepped back, looked at it, nodded once, satisfied in the way people are when they've fixed something no one else noticed was broken. She laughed at something her colleague said, and everyone within earshot turned their head. I introduced myself at the bar. She told me she was divorced, that his name was Damon, that they'd been married 4 years, stayed friends, no hard feelings. We just grew in different directions. She said it the way someone says the weather was nice, clean, easy. I thought, maturity. I thought, she's figured something out that most people haven't. I was engaged to her 14 months later. We married at a vineyard on Bainbridge Island. Just family and 40 people we actually like. She wore something simple and ivory, and she was the most beautiful person in the room. We bought a townhouse in East Lake, 4 blocks from Lake Union. On clear mornings, you could see Mount Rainier from the upstairs bedroom window. She redesigned every room from scratch. It looked like a magazine. It felt like a home. That's harder to pull off than it sounds. For 2 years, everything was exactly what I'd hoped it would be. Damon Reyes was a non-factor, a name mentioned occasionally, a text at the holidays. I was never threatened by that. Ask anyone who knows me. I am not a man who needs to control his wife's friendships. But somewhere in our 3rd year, mature about her ex quietly became spending every weekend at her ex's house. And I never got asked for an opinion about when that crossing happened. It happened the way these things happen, gradually. Then all at once, Damon had bought a place in Fremont, 12 minutes from us. He'd started a landscaping company. When Petra's firm referred a client to him, they reconnected. She told me about it. "That's a small world," I said. "We're both in design." "Not that surprising," she said. That was spring of our 3rd year. By fall, she was having lunch with him weekly. By winter, she was stopping by his place on Saturdays, just to give her professional eye on his garden renovations. By the following spring, the weekends had become a standing arrangement. I noticed all of it. I said nothing, not because I was planning something, because every time I tried to frame a concern, I heard it the way she would hear it. Jealous husband, controlling behavior, doesn't trust his wife. I didn't want to be that man. The first conversation I tried to have was November. We'd been invited to my colleague Nadia's birthday dinner, a small group, the kind of evening Petra usually enjoyed. She came home from Damon's at 6:30 and said she was exhausted, didn't feel up to going. "We already told her we'd be there," I said. "Eli, I've been on my feet all day. Can you go without me?" I went without her. I sat at Nadia's table and told everyone Petra wasn't feeling well. I drove home at 10 to find the lights off, Petra in bed, phone face down on the nightstand. I didn't say anything that night. 2 weeks later, I turned in my chair and said carefully, "I want to talk about the amount of time you're spending over there." She tilted her head. "What about it?" "I feel like we've lost our weekends." Damon's going through a hard time. His business partner left. He needs a friend. I understand that. What I'm saying is, I feel like I'm losing track of you. She looked at me with something that wasn't patience and wasn't irritation, something in between. "Eli, he's my friend. I'm not doing anything wrong." "I didn't say you were. It sounds like you think I am." And there it was. The pivot. My concern became her defense. I didn't know how to push back without sounding like an accusation. So I backed off. Said I wasn't accusing her of anything. Said I was just expressing how I felt. She said she'd try to check in more. She didn't check in more. That's the word they use, check in. For something that used to just be called coming home. I started to understand something then. I was invisible to her in a specific way, not unloved, just unaccounted for. My feelings were a weather pattern she managed around, not a signal she responded to. And I made a quiet decision, not yet knowing what it would look like, just knowing something had to change. January. My director at Meridian, Ford Gallagher, 22 years with the firm, a man who knew the business like his own breathing, called me into his office. "There's an opportunity in Singapore," he said. Meridian was expanding Asia-Pacific operations. They needed someone to head the new regional analysis team. 3-year commitment. Review option after. He told me the compensation package. It was the kind of number that reorganizes your understanding of what's possible. "I'll need a few days," I said. "You've got a week." I went home and told Petra over dinner. She was quiet while I explained. The role, the location, the package. When I finished, she put her fork down. "Singapore," she said. "Singapore."
"Eli, I can move to Singapore. My entire career is here." I told her I wasn't asking her to decide anything that night. Just wanted her to know. Later, she told me she thought we should stay, that our life in Seattle was worth protecting, that she didn't want to uproot everything for a 3-year experiment on the other side of the world.
The next morning, I called Ford and passed. "Family comes first," I said. He said he understood. Said the door wouldn't close completely. I thought I'd made a sacrifice for my marriage. I didn't yet understand that the sacrifice would be invisible to her, that she would never acknowledge it, never reciprocate it, and that 8 months later, she would tell me that turning down Singapore had been my decision alone, and she bore no responsibility for it. I filed that away. Have you ever had to stay silent to protect yourself, even when every part of you wanted to speak up? Tell me in the comments. I read them all. By spring, our conversations had gotten shorter, not hostile, abbreviated. We ate dinner together. We asked how each other's days went. But underneath the routine was the quality of managed distance, not closeness. I remember sitting across from her at the Italian place on Pine Street, where we'd had our first real date, and realizing I was performing ease. Performing the relaxed dinner with my wife thing, I ordered another glass of wine and talked about something safe. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, because this story is about to turn. The conversation that ended everything happened on a Sunday morning in April. She'd been at Damon's the day before, a Saturday I'd mentally earmarked for us. We'd discussed going to the Olympic Sculpture Park, then maybe driving out to Snoqualmie Falls. She'd mentioned it Thursday. By Saturday morning, she texted, "Damon needs help picking furniture. I'll try to be back by 3. She got home at 7:15. I was reading. I said nothing when she walked in. "You're upset," she said. "I'm reading. You're doing the quiet thing." I put the book down. "Petra, I turned down Singapore for this marriage." Something shifted in her expression. "Don't use Singapore as a weapon every time we argue." "I'm not using it as a weapon. I'm telling you, I made a significant sacrifice, and it's been completely invisible to you. I didn't ask you to turn down Singapore. The decision was yours." We stared at her. There was something very precise about the way she said it, like she'd been waiting to use that framing for a while. "I want to know where this is going," I said. "With Damon. With us." She crossed her arms. Her jaw set the way it did when she'd made up her mind. "Eli, if you can't handle me spending time with my ex-husband, maybe we're not right for each other." I heard it, sat with it for exactly 3 seconds. "You're right," I said. She blinked. "I mean it. You're absolutely right." I went upstairs, sat on the edge of the bed for 20 minutes. I wasn't angry. I was something else. The feeling you get when a number you've been trying to make work finally resolves itself cleanly. When the answer is obviously what it is, and you stop trying to make it something different. I wish this were different. I wish Petra had been the kind of wife who would have heard my concern instead of catalogued it as a character flaw. I wish she had asked, once, what I needed. But wishes don't hold up in community property states. What I had, a week-old offer from Ford Gallagher, did. I picked up my phone. Ford answered on the second ring. "Is the Singapore position still available?" Ford called back Tuesday. The position was still open. Internal candidates considered, but no final decision made. My credentials were strong. They wanted to proceed. He needed an answer within a week. That Thursday night, 11:50 p.m., the house was silent. Petra asleep downstairs on the couch or in the guest room. I wasn't sure anymore. One lamp on. My laptop open on the kitchen table. My attorney, Carol Ashworth, 2nd Avenue, downtown, direct and competent, and not hired to give sympathy, had walked me through everything that week. Washington is a community property state. Here's what to expect. Here's the timeline. Here's what happens next. I signed where she'd told me to sign. Then I called Ford. "I'm in," I said. "Welcome back," he said. "We'll get the paperwork moving." He was warm, professional, exactly what I needed at 12:03 a.m. in a quiet kitchen in East Lake. 12:03 a.m. I am 38 years old. I am the incoming head of Meridian Capital's Asia Pacific Regional Analysis Team. And somewhere in this house, Petra was asleep, still believing that Sunday morning's ultimatum had put me back in my place. She'd find out differently. In about 6 hours, I told her on a Thursday evening. We were both in the kitchen, between the end of the workday and dinner, and I said, "Sit down. I need to tell you something." She must have read something in my face. She went immediately still. "We called Ford Gallagher last Sunday," I said. "I took the Singapore position. I've also spoken with an attorney. You'll be served with papers this week. I didn't want that to be the first you heard of any of it. Eli, you told me if I couldn't handle your arrangement with Damon, maybe we weren't right for each other. I've thought about it. I think you were right. I didn't mean it like that. I know. But I think it was more honest than you intended." She started crying. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment, because it would be easy to say I felt nothing, or felt vindicated, or felt like I'd won something. None of those were true. What I felt was sad, deeply, specifically sad. The kind of sad that comes from watching something that could have been good reveal itself as something that wasn't going to survive. I didn't comfort her. I didn't know how to do that, honestly, without making promises I wasn't going to keep. I made dinner. We sat at the table. We barely spoke. She looked at me like I was still the person she thought I was. I wasn't. I hadn't been. For about a year. Ford Gallagher used to say, "Know the difference between a temporary dip and a structural collapse." I always thought he meant markets. He meant everything. Petra eventually bought out my share of the East Lake townhouse. Last I heard, she still lives there. Damon's company is still running. I don't know what became of whatever they were to each other, and at some point, I realized that question had stopped being the most important one. Carol Ashworth handled everything efficiently. The paperwork moved quickly. Petra didn't contest much. I think part of her understood. My brother Theo helped me pack. We worked mostly in silence, the way you do with someone who knows you well enough not to fill the air with noise. As for me, I still have the view from the Meridian Singapore office, 31 floors up, the city laid out below me like a circuit board lit at night. I think about that Sunday morning sometimes. The kitchen, the coffee I set down, and I think, some ultimatums are gifts. They just don't arrive wrapped the way you'd expect. If you've ever been handed a choice framed as a threat and found the clarity to actually choose, I want to hear your story. Tell me in the comments, and if this one moved you, subscribe. There are more to come.